Well, folks, sure is a beauty day out here. This is one of my favorite days of the week. This is Saturday, and I get some time to get out and do some things I like to do. One of those things involves my sawmill. Many of you out there probably either own one of these sawmills or one similar, or you're looking at buying one, and you come across all these posts online and people talking, and maybe talking with experience, maybe talking from what they hear. But what they're talking about oftentimes is my lumber is not exactly the correct dimensions, meaning they set their sawmill up to cut a 4x4 and it turns out to be something different than that. 4 1/4, 4 1/8, maybe it's got a bit of a wave in it. And then they start going off on all these tangents about what the problem is and blaming all the equipment more so than potentially themselves and setting up the equipment. I'm not saying this is the case for all of them, but I laugh from time to time because I know the solution to a lot of the problems, and a lot of it comes down to setup. This equipment is pretty straightforward. If you think about it, this is more or less just a blade with 2 band wheels and an engine driving it. It's pretty stationary with the exception of the bed. If you can keep that bed nice and flat, you're probably going to eliminate a lot of your off-dimensional cuts that you're complaining about. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm no expert sawyer, so there are people out there and they've got it dialed in and they know exactly why things are happening. I know for the most part what's happening, but if you know more than I do, probably many of you do, put it down below. But what I'm going to show you is what I know. What I know about fixing your cuts to make sure they're the dimensions you set them up to be. So let's go on inside here. This 4x4, you guys probably would have seen me cut similar 4x4s in the past, and usually you cut them and you put them up on the pile. You guys can see my pile over there and you don't think anything of them. That is, of course, unless you're very precise and you're constantly checking when you're done cutting to make sure they're exactly the dimensions you want. I do that from time to time, but to be honest with you, I get into a groove, I start cutting, and I just assume it's correct. Well, for this one, I could tell something was off because I had a look at it, and I can definitely see that there is a bit of a swoop in it. When I say swoop, I mean the dimensions change from the front, or the one end, to the other. Why this happens is, well, I know why, because my bed is not flat. My bed can be slightly out of level, and that's going to be all right, but if it is not flat, well, you're going to have this sawmill tracking on something that might end up looking like this, which in fact, that's how the bed's set up. So I got to level the bed first and foremost, but before I do so, I'm going to show you how you might learn whether your bed is out of flatness, and it starts with a tape measure. Take a look at this 4x4. I just had it on edge, so I just had it on this edge and I made a cut, and that was my last cut. And now I'm going to flip it over and show you the dimensions. This is set up according to my scale on my sawmill to be a exact 4" by 4" board. Well, let's come down to this end and make sure you're at a square edge here. Put your tape up to that, and let's see if you guys see down there? Yeah, what's that? That's pretty good. That's like 4 1/16, right? My camera's for some reason talking to me. That's 4 1/16. What's this? That's probably 3 15/16. So it's off just a little bit. Let's come to the middle. That's pretty much 4 dead on. So we're off by a 1/16. That is not bad. Watch at the very end here. Holy smokes! What do we got there? That's a good 4 1/8. So there's a good 3/16 of an inch. Come on up. There's a good 3/16 of an inch difference from one end of the board to the other. That's not going to fly. That's not going to work for me, especially if you're building something with this. You're going to end up having something that's out of whack according to how this board's set up. And you don't want to plane every one of these, especially if you're just out building the shed or something. So I'm going to show you how to fix this, and it all starts with getting the bed nice and flat, and ultimately, if you want, you can make it nice and level. Now, before I show you how to flatten that bed or make it level, I want to show you another telltale sign that is going to suggest your sawmill bed is not flat. Check this out. Where the heck's this thing going? Well, it's going to the lowest point. And that lowest point is probably a good 8 feet from the end of the mill. So that is going to contribute to that swoop in your logs. And one other indicator I've learned over the years, if you take your hand and just sort of rock your sawmill, and giving that a rock there, you shouldn't have any distance between the wheels here and the track. If you have some rocking going on and you can basically create space under that wheel, well, and that goes for any wheel, well, that's going to indicate it's not exactly flat. So far so good. So far so good. I'm rocking it here. Look at that. Watch this. Watch that front wheel up there. You guys watch it? They should all be rolling. Oh, that one stopped rolling. Still not rolling. And it starts rolling again. Okay, so that's telling me that throughout the course of moving along this bed here, we have a space where either the bed swoops or swoops on the other side, but whatever, it's not flat. So we're gonna get that fixed up. All right, guys. Well, after a bit of wrenching here, I got the mill pretty well flat, pretty well level, and I'm not talking just lengthwise, side to side as well. Now, if you're looking at placing your mill and putting it on individual blocks like I have, see how there's individual blocks for every 2 legs? Well, this works good if you live in a spot where you don't get the freeze-thaw cycle, so maybe down in southern US somewhere. But here up in Canada and probably throughout the northern US states, this is not going to probably be the easiest solution for you, because at some point or another, if the frost moves your base, which it tends to do yearly for me, you're going to be spending a nice day like today out here realigning things. Now, there's much worse things you could be doing, but I'm just telling you, if it were up to me, and I might end up doing this, I would go and cut 2 really long beams and probably try to cut them a bit longer than your mill bed itself, but get 2 really long beams, maybe even steel, position them on that. Then you don't even have to worry about these legs here. Although the legs are quite easy to use and they provide you pretty much infinite adjustment, I would get 2 long beams as opposed to the individual leg setup and going along with the wrench and leveling it that way. Now, assuming you're still watching, that means you probably are going to put a base down like this, or you already have a base down like this and you want to level it or flatten it out the best you can. What I like to do is use a string line, and you guys can see my string line here behind me. And if you have a look here, I go to one end of the string line and I put a block here, and this block is, well, I know what it is. It's a sticker. It's an inch by an inch. So I put that underneath my string line. And if you guys look way down here, I do the exact same thing down here at this end. Just make sure that size is the exact same size as the block at the other end, 1 inch. Then what I do is I get another piece of wood, but I make sure this piece of wood is approximately 1/8 of an inch higher or taller than the blocks at the end. And the reason you want this piece taller than this piece is, notice how this particular bunk, it doesn't have the top piece of steel on it, that cap, whereas all the rest in the middle do. I want to take into account that cap height. Now I'm assuming it's somewhere close to 1/8 of an inch. So if I get a block of wood and it's about 1/8 of an inch higher than my block holding up the string, I can use this board, or this sticker rather, as a bit of a check. So after I get my string line in place, I can come along and I can try to fish this piece of wood underneath the string line. When it fits perfectly under every single string line, like so, all the way along, well, at that point you now know your mill is flat. Flat is half the battle. If you want to make it level, well, I got my 6-foot level out there, and it just becomes a matter of starting at one end, making sure the first 3 bunks are level, moving that level down, making sure the next 3 are level, etc., etc. Once you've got that done, you think you're done, but then you got to remember, we need to have it level side to side. So I get out my little torpedo level, where I put it. So I get out my torpedo level, and when I'm leveling things, I like to start at one end or the other. And just like I took my string line to make sure it was flat, I just follow the consistency method, put it on the first bunk like so. So way down here, put it on the first bunk. And if you have a look there, that is pretty good there. Now, if it wasn't good, if it needed adjustment, that is when I would use my wrench on both sides, both legs, that one and that one, to get it level. Once that one's level side to side, then I move on to the next one. Take the torpedo level and repeat. That's basically the process for getting this thing level, getting it flat. What you're going to notice is if you make this thing level and flat, you're going to end up with some nice lumber, and you're probably going to eliminate all those headaches you've been worrying about where the lumber is an inconsistent size. Now, just before I go here, if you want to figure out whether the length of your mill is flat or not, as I mentioned, you can use a 6-foot level or longest level you have, or you can use one of these guys. This is a string level. This just clips on to the string line. We can get her on there. basically like so. Now the string line is great and all, and I find it very helpful for sort of rough measurements for level. But if I'm trying to be accurate, I really like to use the longest level I have, the 6-foot level, and throw that from bunk to bunk to bunk. So that's going to do it for me here today. It's a beautiful Saturday afternoon. I'm going to relax out here, cut a few more logs, and probably head her on in for a coffee. As you guys know, that's my favorite drink, and even when it's 30 degrees Celsius, I'm still chugging that back. Guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.